Thank you again, Stacey, for being willing to be part of this coaching demo, coaching conversation. I want to make it truly as useful to you as possible.
Wonderful.
So it's not just a perfunctory teaching. Tell me what would make this call super useful for you, Stacey. What would you love to get out of it?
I would love to learn more about how to offer this up for teamwork. I've had great success with individuals and I've had success with teams, but I'd like to have more teams to work with. And the more I understand it, obviously, the better I can share it. So I think whatever happens in today's time together, and I want to acknowledge that I give my approval for recording and also for sharing my results. Yeah, whatever happens is going to be beneficial.
That's great. In addition to working with teams, what is it that you're wanting to bring into the world right now? What is it that you're working on, chewing on, creating, being challenged by? What's kind of front and center for you right now, Stacey?
So in 2016, I made the declaration to be a coach, to follow my bliss and do what I feel I was born to do. I've owned a marketing company for 22 years, so it was very, very different. And now I'm a highly credentialed and certified coach. I'm living my bliss. The days I get to coach are just always the best days. And in my dream, and I have things like master project management and Lean Six Sigma black belt, ISO 9001 things. In my area, there's 700 manufacturing companies in my county alone. And so my vision was to go in to help companies improve their bottom line, to work with teams to help their life at work be better and more fulfilling. And with the knowledge that they're gonna take that home with them, and then that's gonna spill into the community. So that's my passion.
Oh my gosh, how wonderful. How wonderful. I'm so moved by how you see the spillover effects from how you've trained yourself to what you're able to give others to what they're able to give to the community. Gosh, kudos to you. I see on the wall behind you a few of those many, many credentials you've resourced yourself with in following your bliss. So that's excellent. And the FEBI, I mean, as you know, you're not a beginner to FEBI. If you were a beginner to FEBI before we even opened the report, we'd go through the energies together. We'd feel them in our bodies because, of course, what makes FEBI different is that it can be experienced. It's also an energy that runs through all those levels you talked about. It runs through how we are in ourselves, how we are with manufacturing companies in our county, how we can help them develop. In giving people access to, in a sense, the hard copy, the physical body that lets us make shift happen. And of course, the spillover effects in our community. And as we go through the report, I invite you to keep returning to what energies do you feel your community needs more now? Do you feel the companies need more now? What energies do you feel need to be a little bolstered through your work? As you work with companies, not all clients are the same, not all people are the same, but sometimes there's certain needs of the times. For example, in these times overall, we see the rise of visionary energy because it's so needed in turbulence to see that big picture. As you look at your local environment, what do people need? What do leaders need? And we'll come back to that in terms of your interest in helping teams more. Okay.
What an amazing question.
These energies come out of very ancient wisdom traditions as well as from the research of the 1930s. So they can go very deep. And when we really feel into what people need, sometimes it gives us hints into what we have to be to bring that out, what we have to do to bring that energy out. Right. So let's start with your report and then we'll go from there. How about that?
That sounds great.
What I will do is, and thank you for giving permission to share your report. I'm going to share my screen. I have your report in front of me. And let's just go through a few pages together as we would in a normal coaching conversation to just make sure, check for understanding. And maybe we'll keep thinking about this. How does it apply to teams? How does it apply to your work and with your companies and communities? But page 5 gives the overall profile. An overall profile with these little volume buttons showing how much of each energy you see yourself using. Again, this is not good or bad. This is not right or wrong. It's how you answered these 120 questions, 30 for each pattern, that we add up and then normalize on a scale that gives this what's called a STEN score, a standard 10-point scale, where the very highest scores, the top like 5% or so, are 9s and 10s, high are 7, 8, moderate, where most scores fall, 5, 6, low, 3, 4, and then the very low 1 and 2. And we see your scores are all in the moderate to high range. You see yourself having fairly balanced access to all the patterns, some preference for collaborator, a slight preference for collaborator. Does that feel right, or what does this speak to in you?
Yeah, that definitely feels right. That I'm kind of known as the person to go to for resources and always include, and even with all the different types of trainings I've had, it's collaborator almost in the sense that, to me, it's this beautifully woven tapestry that just gets tighter and more beautiful with the knowledge and the learning, and that's what drew me to this so much, was the hope it provides and accelerated wisdom for we can tap in to all of these, and we don't have to just modify where we are, but we can become, which to me is so exciting.
It's so exciting. I know. I share that. One thing I'll draw your attention to, which is new in the FEBI report this year, when we went to the STEM scoring, things get rounded to the most even digit. And so the scores are simpler to show, but the higher resolution score, if you will, is at the bottom of page 5 in the table. I just would draw your attention to that, where you see the closer to the exact STEM score that you got. And that's where you can see where there might be a slight difference between visionary and organizer, even though both scored or averaged up to a 7. The collaborator may be a point higher, or a point and a half higher. So the more exact scores are down there. And this is one way where we can see where there are ties in the STEM score. We can resolve it at a finer granularity if that becomes useful. Yeah. So any questions or comments there?
No, not at this time.
Okay, so as we scroll down through pages 6 through 9, this is where we look at a pattern one at a time, through driver, through organizer, through collaborator. And because collaborator was a little higher, you'll see in the first line, this is identified likely to be your home pattern, and also then visionary. The wording through very low through very high is the same in all reports, but what applies to your particular score is in the darkened box. As you took a look through this, did any questions or insights arise? Anything that you'd like to draw attention to?
Let's see, I did take some notes. Let me see what I wrote on that. Just as I mentioned that when I looked at my MBTI and how closely how similar some of that was. It's really interesting to me for compared to how my life was before, where there wasn't a whole lot of collaboration. I lived my life as kind of a lone wolf. And so it's to me, I think the comment is how important it is to be able to identify this sooner rather than later, so that we can show up in life as our authentic self.
Your authentic self, right. And different roles that we take in life will bring out some of these patterns a little more. We especially see that in the work behaviors page, which we'll get to in a moment. But it's almost like when we're in a role that encourages us to be a lone wolf, we'll have more of those lone wolf patterns, more the driver, the independent worker, maybe the organizer, we work with one person at a time. But when we're in a more social role, or the collaborator can come to the fore. And I agree with you, knowing these things can be so helpful. Do you remember what your Myers-Briggs score is? What your type?
Ian, I just had it here earlier. ENFJ, I want to say.
Yeah, ENFJ. That NF is we see a strong correlation. I see a strong correlation with that kind of heart leadership, a collaborator, organizer, NFJ, collaborator, organizer, and more NFP goes toward collaborator, visionary. But you, again, have strong, I'll say ready accessibility to all of them. So it seems that you could probably move between those very, very readily. So then this is brought out in style a little bit more. We talk about primary style is how our home pattern, kind of playing along in the background, gets mixed with our secondary or third, tertiary patterns to bring out styles, ways we approach the world. And we say generally more styles gives us more agility, so that it gives us more ways to show up, more energies to bring out. We see the collaborator, visionary as a style, collaborator, organizer as a style. And again, these tend to be oriented toward people, humanitarian orientation, or wanting to help one person at a time. So what better than coaching for the community, right? It's going to fit so much what you described earlier. Any connections you made between these styles and your passion?
It was so scary in 2016 to finally commit to, leaving the marketing company who paid the bills, but to really step in. And ultimately what happened is I was rear-ended by a commercial van. And it took me 10 hours to do a quote that normally would have taken an hour and a half. And ultimately my brain healed. I got great results back from the testing and stuff. But during that time, when my brain was healing, it was really scary. And it was also scary kind of going into, so what if coaching is just as hard? But I kind of had this intuition feeling of, it won't be. This is what you were meant to do. And so it won't be. But I had really bad COVID, like where I slept for 10 days. But every time I woke up, my heart was filled with joy, with the realization that as soon as I felt better, I could coach. And so I see that collaborator and visionary. I think when I filled my PCC application, I had over 500 hours of coaching.
Wow.
So that visionary part really played into, how do I want to show up to the world as a coach with lots of different bases of wisdom and different modalities to help reach people where they are. And so until that, Ginny, I'd never really seen myself as a visionary, but when I look at my life and what I've created, I had to have been.
Yeah, as well as having enough access to, I'll call it the organizer's planful ways to be able to execute it, right? To be able to bring it to ground in some concrete steps that could take you from a company paying the bills to building your own dream, building your own,
I'm so glad you said that, because I was really struggling with organizer, because I typically put that in as like I did the HBDI years ago, and it said entrepreneur, all this creative, but under stress pulling into administrative, which I tied more to organizer. And if you saw my office, my work office is clean and spotless, but my home office looks like there was a tornado. And so it's like, how am I ranking that high? But when you point out I'm ranking that high because of how I can get things done and not the cleanliness of my office, that helps make a lot more sense.
Right. Yeah, the visionary really can rely on the organizer to give its great ideas form, to form them in the world, to form them in our bodies, into our actions. So it's not just, sometimes we think of administration as like all those irritating details, but it's also just the beauty of holding form for our dreams. Right?
Yeah, that is so cool. And it really helps explain. Now, would I love it if my office was neat and clean? I would, but it just doesn't end up being the priority. But I just love how you phrase that, because it takes it into such a deeper understanding of organizer.
The backup style is also available to you because all 4 of your patterns were moderate or higher, which is the logic used in the report for selecting whether we feel we have access to a style. So collaborator driver, this is an extroverted style that really shows up in a big way, and this is the kind of coach who can change a community, right? Because she's gonna send a loud signal into the world. And the boldness is what signals this kind. It tends to be a very extroverted style. This is a very extroverted style. Both collaborator and driver are extroverted oriented patterns in a Myers-Briggs sense. Extroverted toward people and extroverted toward task. Yeah.
And I think as somebody that's been self-supporting for 22 years, if I didn't have some driver, I wouldn't have been able to sustain that. I would have had to have gotten a job at some point.
Right. That's a really great point, Stacey. That again, one of the mature, resourceful aspects of driver is that it protects the work. It's like a protector. It makes sure that those tender shoots of visionary ideas and the collaborator love of people don't get trampled on. So it can be a great protector of the work. Make sure the bills get paid.
Yeah,
that's great. So we then come to the work behaviors, which, as you know, is a sort of what you answered in some forced choice questions where you couldn't give everything a high score or a low score. So sometimes it teases things apart a little bit, and again, can show where our situation, the particular role we're in, might be bringing out or resonating with certain energies in us because we do those things a lot. Because here we were asked, what do you actually do? And we color code those by the pattern that behavior centers on. And what I like to do is just cover the bottom half with my hand and see what colors dominate in the top half. And then I cover the top half with my hand and see what colors dominate in the bottom half. When you do that, what do you notice? What do you see? How does it fit in for you?
Yeah, that beautiful yellow and blue are so strong. And what I did is I compared this to the one that I'd taken before I really was embracing being a coach, and making work fun was at the top. Like it took work to make work fun. And now I think it's so low because it just is.
I could take for granted. And it just isn't that interesting. It's right. Because some of the things we put near the bottom don't necessarily mean we don't do them, but we're not having to effort a lot toward them or something. Yeah. Right. Great.
That stood out so strongly of like, wow, because I'm all about fun. And then it was like, yeah, but it's not work anymore. Before, when you're stopping to code a website and it's just drudgery, if you got to find a way to make it fun.
Well, you are a living example, Stacey, of the phrase, when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. I'm really touched by your COVID story of waking up each morning saying, when I get well, I can go back to coaching. That really, oh boy, that speaks to somebody who has found her work. Good for you. So we see the strong collaborator organizer style, 5 of the 6 collaborator, 5 of the 6 organizer behaviors rise to the top. And we see the behaviors less emphasized or less practiced in your current life, rolling more to the bottom. You had to make forced choices. So this isn't a judgment call or anything. But as you look at the things that fall to the top, we see kind of your winning way, as we look at the things that fall to the bottom, we see the question I always ask myself is there anything down here that could really help me now in what I'm trying to bring into the world? As you ask yourself those questions, anything stand out for you?
What a great question, Jenny, because when I was looking at this and I saw a visionary falling more to the bottom, I bought Golden Career Strategies in the end of 2020, and I gave myself a year to rebuild it. Like, it hadn't been touched in since 2013. And when I bought it, there were no active clients. And so I almost feel like the same thing happened with Make Things Fun, because my dream was, and I achieved everything I wanted to do in 2021, to then be able to say at the beginning of 22 is, here we are, and here's how we can serve you. And so it almost, to me, felt like maybe that shift happened because there's less need for visionary right now, and more need for, that collaborator and organizer to start bringing in new clients.
There you go. It's like you visioned your future and you're bringing it about, right? It's not like you were at a major transition. It's a great point that we don't need the same amount of each pattern at each point in our life, right? And sometimes we reach an inflection point where we're kind of finished with that, but this other thing becomes so important. Yeah.
Right. And that's exactly why, man, this is why I love this assessment so much, is because we're literally teaching people how to create those neural pathways in their brain so that they can, as you change through life and you need different things, it's available to you. It just excites me.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. Is there anything that you see near the bottom that seeing it in the bottom, you think, for what I want to do now, I need to be more attentive to that? Or does it say, would you say, no, that's pretty good. Those things do not need more attention. This is good.
Another great question. Yeah. Hitting financial targets is really, really important to me. And it's something that I've struggled with a little bit. I grew up below poverty level and have spent most of my life in a poverty mindset. And so somebody said, you really need to start laying out what you want financially so that you can actually achieve it. And the miracle was the first time I did that, and I thought I set it high, but that was for February, and I reached the goal by February 8th.
Whoa.
And I was like, wow, so what's going to happen in March? And energetically, I need to not let myself go into a place of fear, but know that I so well prepared myself for the role I have to serve our world.
Wow. Stacey, that's
wonderful. So, but that one should be higher. I'm glad it's at least a driver.
Well, to your point, it seems like all you really need to do is to have a clear picture of what that target is. You have to have that target in mind. And it's always true that when we can put our energy toward what we want to create or what we want to realize, we're going to be more likely to bring it about. So just knowing what that target is month to month or quarter to quarter, whatever time horizon is for you, and then giving yourself some reward when you hit it, right? Celebrate. And when you can do that on the 8th of the month rather than the 28th, that's like pretty darn special.
Yeah, it was kind of mind blowing. And it made me like so excited for my future and surround myself with other professional coaches so that I don't fall into that trap of, oh, I'm charging people too much.
Right.
I'm not. I worked hard to.
You worked hard to get here, and all those certificates on the wall prove it, right? Yeah. No, and I can tell people would be fortunate to have you as a coach because you have such a care for them. So no, it's set those targets where they need to be to protect the work, to create what that long-term picture for you. Your interest in teams, I'll just pause in this chart for a moment to say this is one of my favorite pages when I work with teams, because you get a roll up in the team report, in the group report, of what everybody answered on this. And so you can start to see the dynamics of a team. And if this were a team report, not an individual report, we might see that they have real strengths and things that relate to that organizer and collaborator area. Maybe they that kind of heart leadership. They might be really great with the people and the process and the agenda, but maybe they're not hitting financial targets is more detrimental to the company, or they're not challenging and winning is getting them run over by other teams in the company or something like that. So this report from a team perspective can be a great discussion topic in a team session, right?
Definitely.
As you can imagine, and just asking those same kind of questions that you and I have talked about of a team. What are the implications of these things being at the bottom? Is that okay? Or does something pop to the top out for that needs greater attention?
Right. I had the opportunity to work with one team, and almost everybody showed up with their strongest as visionary. And it made for a lot of laughter and some really great conversations.
Right. That's I've been there too, and I know I know what you're talking about. It can be so eye-opening to people to realize, whoa, no wonder we like each other so much, and there's some things we might not be doing well. So yeah, that's great.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Well, the other part of this, especially when you're working in a team with young leaders, to realize that a lot of, when being able to access all four usually comes with time and gaining that wisdom and that knowledge and experience. And so to know that most people don't leave their job, they leave their bosses, to know that this is an incredible tool for young leaders to be a good boss is really, man, that's going to help in all those areas I talked about when we first mentioned of, the vision of trickle down.
That's right. That's right. Because when you can be a good boss, there is a trickle down to all the people who call you boss, right? For whom you are the boss. It's a great observation. One of the questions that I'll sometimes ask around in teams as well as with individuals is there any one of these patterns you don't like? Because that's often one that anyone that we have an attitude about, like I hate that side of me, or I hate it when we as a team do XYZ. It's good to know, because it's often unconsciously we won't go there. We'll avoid that part, and even from a diversity point of view, we won't respect it in others if we don't like it in ourselves. So
Right.
I will often ask, is there, especially if there's a lot of split in terms of favorite and least favorite patterns, is there something that you think you really undervalue? That's
Right.
right. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I learned years ago that the leaders that we admire is usually because we have those characteristics ourselves, but we haven't developed them maybe to the point we see in the other. I'd never thought about the reverse of that, which you just beautifully explained. But that's really powerful. Like who if I'm conflicting with somebody, what about me could that be a reflection of?
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. I used to get so irritated when I was running a meeting and when people would throw off my agenda. And I realized, like, wait, just when I understood about the patterns, I understood, like, not everybody honors agendas quite like an organizer does. And like I probably shouldn't honor it quite the same way either.
Great. And I'm usually like, I'm sorry, but I think creating an agenda is a waste of my time. Let's just jump in and do this.
Let's just do this. I say. Right. Exactly.
I've learned better.
Because the driver was the fourth of your four patterns, it shows up as a development opportunity, but it doesn't mean you have to develop driver. There's this page here that says, here's some symptoms of underusing this pattern. And this is here. So we can kind of think of them as sort of like a checklist, and you can use your highlighter, do any of these hit or miss, is there anything here that resonates for you that you'd say, oh yeah, maybe I do need to. But as you look through this list, is there anything that would signal you that you'd want to develop more driver, or not necessarily?
Setting and hitting goals financial. Any other goals, I'm fine with. I'm fine with clear direction. I usually do have, especially in the marketing world, I made this horrible mistake, Ginny, of just assuming that every email was an emergency. And it took me about 12 years before I learned to say, when do you need this by? And the answer was never today, right? So for years, I worked till like 10 at night based on an assumption. And so that sometimes I actually am working really hard to not have a sense of urgency. Like for the new phone I bought for this company, I don't pay it any attention except during business hours. My other phone, 24/7, people would be contacting me. And so I don't think I have a problem of underusing driver other than, I think, it makes me think, so I wonder if I would do better if I kind of acknowledge to myself, hey, part of your role as president and owner of this company is you're also a salesperson.
There you go. There you go. You know what also struck me as I was listening to you, Stacey, is that it's not one of these bullets listed here. It's kind of implied, but is that one of the occupational hazards of a strong collaborator, especially collaborator visionary, is that she can put too much on her plate. You take more on, help another person, help another client, and sorting priorities. Or I loved your phrase, thinking everything's an emergency, because I can't let this person down and I can't let that person down. And, that taking out that conscientiousness of the organizer, add that into the mix. That sometimes what driver can be so useful for is pruning the to-do list or setting a few priorities. And where that can be helpful is that it helps us target or vision more clearly what really is so important. Out of the 600 things I could do, what are the top 3? Or what's the one thing I need to finish this week? Or what would make this client engagement successful? Of all the different directions we could take it, what's the priority here? So that pointed discernment of the driver is just a momentary check about priorities, financial goal setting that might be helpful, that it might help you in realizing your vision, and not get some of that extraneous stuff on your plate for too long.
Right. I know when I rewrote the course manual, we have a career transition. It's like 200 pages. It hadn't been updated in almost a decade. And when I would prepare to work on that, I would look at what does the driver's workspace look like? What does and I'd play that music. I would look at the art and really prepare myself to, this has to get done. And this is how many hours today you're going to spend, or this is how many modules you're going to finish.
Wow.
And so I love the the different, and I created different on Spotify, different soundtracks for FEBI Driver, FEBI so that I can tap into that, because being able, just because I can access it more easily doesn't mean I necessarily want to as much as I know I need to.
Yeah. No, that is great, and a great application of those moments where we can use driver. We can use it as support. I think one of the real tricks with drivers, how do we bring it in small doses where it's useful, but not so much that we get tight or uptight or tense or, frustrated or angry, or, some of the risks of overdoing driver, that kind of type A, high blood pressure-ish, feeling inside in our bodies. But how to, in a very relaxed way, know when to be very pointed, that it's, so as the report closes then with development recommendations that go into the behaviors, the breath, the background, the body, the 4 Bs, right? So different ways of bringing out each of the patterns. And in terms of the behaviors, the one that we kind of were talking about earlier that is second on this list on page 15, the knowing your top priorities, for example, or it could be related to setting a financial goal, you know, but I think holding it lightly in the sense of, you don't need a lot of this, right? You're doing really well. This is not like fixing something that's broken. It's more what would just help your energy naturally flow to those, you know, to realizing those goals. So anything else that comes to you on this page, or anything that stands out to you as being like, oh yeah, I think I want to remember that, or
well, the focus for meetings, you know, one of the things I've been doing is hosting a Monday morning roundtable, and I end promptly, and so that it really has helped me, so that, you know, I was making the joke about the agenda, but really being more focused, because it's a respect for others' time.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent.
And we talked about the priorities. Keeping score. I think paying more attention to that. So how am I doing compared to my financial goals, and how many new clients did I get this week? And because it's not, you know, it's always not so much about the money as it is seeing people like tap into, oh my gosh, I just created this. I'm now working where I never thought I could. And, you know, that celebratory stuff.
That's right. That's right. And that's a great example of collaborator and driver together. Keep score so you can celebrate. So, I like that.
Awesome. Reduce distractions. I think that's a great recommendation for me, because I would imagine collaborating and visionary, that part of that is distraction.
It can be shiny, you know, it can be like, what's the next thing that grabs my attention? So good to know that has that tendency, and that driver can cut through and say, this isn't as important. This doesn't as much reach that, you know, that goal you set for yourself or whatever. This isn't going to help that community as much as this other thing, you know. So that discernment, that sharp discernment, is something driver is so good at. But and again, you have ready access to it. There might be some points in your day, points in your process, points in your coaching, points in your business thinking where it wants to come to the fore. But I'm not going to let you suggest another one, or else there'll be too many. So, anyway, I don't want to fill your plate with more driver.
Right. But it's not so much that I would do each of those, but the enforced clarity in action. So what that helps is, even just being aware of that, is it tells me, Stacey, you have everything it needs to focus, to actively reach out and let your offer be heard.
That's right. That's right.
I kind of needed to hear that, or read that, or see that.
That's right. The development recommendations will go on to just some breathing exercises or ways we can handle our office. I love that you've built a music list things for this music, and sharp things that we can do physically with the body when we need to. When you need to access, I don't know if you can do that when you're sitting there. I know you're holding your wonderful little dog, but if you needed to access driver, what do you do when you have to access it in a moment?
I stand up and I do the point, and I feel my muscles flex when I do it. I mean, I'd tighten every part of that. I step forward into people's space. I usually tend to be back out. Can I share a brief story?
Sure.
So I had this happened several years ago, and I had just learned about power plays, and I shook this client's hand, and he flipped my hand over and said, "How's your little company doing?" And I thought, oh my gosh, how many years has he been doing that to me? And so I flipped his hand back up, and I leaned in really close, and I put my hand on his arm, because that's kind of a power play. And I leaned in, and I very quietly said, "It's so good. I've started firing the people I don't like working with." And he, from that point on, he was an A client. But I thought, wow, we'd worked together for, 12 years. I thought, how many times did he do that? And I just never knew what was happening.
Oh, wow. That's such a great story. That
But
is
but
such a great story.
yeah, but I think that always reminds me of when you need to show up as a driver, do
Yeah,
it. He really, it changed how he viewed me from that point on, which is
right.
great.
That's right. Um, and to bring into reality the kind of vision that you described at the start of this call, um, there's it takes a certain, I want to say, grandness of vision and skill in execution and presence of person. This is not someone who has a wimpy handshake with her little company. This is someone who has her legs under her. Do you understand what I mean? That's what I get from your story and what I get from you. Yeah. So, you expressed a desire to explore more deeply how this can be brought out with teams. And we talked about it a little bit with respect to work behaviors. Any other insights that you put together, as we just had a chance to talk through your report again, about how it could be used in teams, or any questions you'd have that you'd like to just sound out together?
I think that, work sharing comes to mind. For if these are areas that you're always stretching in, that can be exhausting. And we don't always say, we don't want to, because we're not putting any judgments on anything of this is good and this is bad. So just kind of saying, how can we support each other as a
Yeah.
team so that, we can acknowledge, where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are, so that we can grow together and of course build trust and understand the power of communication, which this is a huge part of. If you don't know how you show up, how can you converse about it?
That's right. That's right. You're not going to be able to talk about, I mean, that internal awareness is really the foundation for being able to now have awareness in our relationships and our teams. And I love your point about work sharing. It's something that we can often talk about in team sessions, or encourage teams to explore even after the session with one another. Now that you know this about one another, where some of these passions lie, these strengths lie, where might there be some natural interdependencies where you do this, I do that, or let's handshake on this, or share this part of it, so that we're both playing to our strengths. It's one of the things that people often ask me is, we emphasize in emphasizing development of a weak pattern, are we saying don't play to our strengths? And no, we're not saying that. I mean, as you point out, when we're always doing stretch things, it takes a lot of energy and it can be exhausting. And there's a place for that. But there's also, when it comes to really getting a team to its peak performance, being able to play our best game is going to be really important, and helping to understand one another in terms of what their best game is, and right, and how we can fill in where each other is either weaker or doesn't have enough time or something like that, right?
Right. And you know what, Ginny, sometimes it's even just low confidence. So having somebody who you feel like is good at that, and just sitting with you or engaging with you, so that you then can see for yourself that you really have what it takes
Right.
to do that. And to it just is the kind of almost a buddy,
That's right. That's almost a buddy. Um, the and that can, one of the things I'm really feeling into as I'm listening to you talk about teams is that, we grow up in a very individualistic culture in the United States, and most of the cultures of the world are much more group oriented than we are. But what you're really pulling on is how relationally and how these patterns work in relationships is so important.
Mhm.
And when we can get a really good handshake, it's sort of like what style is in an individual. It becomes like style squared with other people. It's that blend of energies with other people where there can be real magic in that. It's like two poles of a battery. So much energy flows between them when they know how to work together, right?
Right.
So that it can be huge. Go ahead with what you're going to say.
The idea of we feel each other's energy.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm meeting somebody, I say I come in a mood of joy because I'm so excited about the possibilities of what can happen as you become a new observer, leading to new actions and those sustainable results you desire, the
Yes.
basic OR model. But I'm a heart math coach and trainer.
Oh, wonderful.
And whenever I hook somebody up to the stuff, and be like, why can't I get in coherence? I relax, I meditate, I do all these things, but we know it's not about relaxation, it's about coherence. But what fascinated me, and this has happened every time, if I sit by that person and bring myself into coherence, every time within 10 seconds, they're in coherence too. So if we pay attention to our driver, and how, if we're pushing that energy so hard, how is that other person relating to that? Like, does driver energy scare them? Or does collaborator put them off because they're so focused on working hard and not there's no time for play.
Bella has a different point of view.
Yeah.
I love Bella.
She did such a good job napping through
Yeah,
most of this.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. But she woke up full of joy.
Yeah.
And she too could be part of the coaching conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can probably stop it there, unless there's any question you're left with or anything else you'd like to ask about or talk about before we close.
I so enjoyed this conversation and the being able to be in the training again. My commitment was for this year to not add new things, but to take a deeper dive into what I'd learned. And so I'm so excited for this opportunity to really be able to embody how FEBI helps.
I am so grateful to you for embodying it. I'm so happy to learn also that you do the heart math work. That has really intrigued me also because of my work with resonance and coherence.
Yes,
and
right.
I love how you're putting those two together. And I'd encourage you to explore and experiment with how the different energy patterns come through you in coherence, and how you can create that with other people. You've been feeling how that happens in conversation, or how that happens when you sit near someone.
What a great idea to do that, to listen to the music, to do the art, to really embody each one, and
Right.
then hook myself up to see what's my heart rate variability and can I get into coherence in each. That's a fascinating idea.
Let me know how it goes.
I will.
Okay. I think you've coached me as much as I've coached you in this, but what a wonderful time to talk with you. And thank you, Stacey, both for this and for your work in the world. I so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And I send the same back.